I want to welcome our students to the Chris Foglio Douglas Career Conference. I'm Leslie Danahy, Assistant Dean and Executive Director of the Bold Center. If you haven't visited the Bold Center, you need to come on over virtually or eventually in person. We're looking forward to eventually being back with you in person. But this is kind of fun too, because this is my first career conference in my entire life that I ever attended wearing yoga pants. And I'm allowed to do that because I do have a yoga session at 2. So I'm so happy to be here, and a shout out to Chris Foglio, who's a Douglas alumna from '84. She's an entrepreneur. She has her own company, Community Investment Strategies. And I think Chris, her generosity makes this conference possible. And she's such a terrific woman. I've enjoyed getting to know her over the years. So welcome to our attendees. And this is our today's panel. Topic is leading by example. Executive level leaders discuss emotional intelligence and relationship building. And our panel today includes Diane Trineski, former EVP, Chief Digital Officer and Chief Technology Officer at HBO. Janine Gianfredi, Director Global Consumer Marketing at Instagram. And Christina Martin-Graisman, Head of SAP on AWS Partners, America's Amazon Web Services. So lot of letters in your, Christina, in your title. So we'll start with Diane, but I want each of you to tell the students a bit about your career path so they can get to know you. And I'll let Diane start.
Sure. Thank you. And I am pleased to be a part of this today. So I am a Rutgers, obviously, alumni, and my first job actually came out of an internship that I had through Rutgers, and it was at the PBS station in New York, Channel 13. And so I did my internship my last semester, and then at the end of my semester, I stayed on in a full-time position. My background, my degree is in journalism and communication. And as my career progressed though, I always added technology into that. As I left WNET, PBS, and went to ABC, which was my next position, I made a point of going into different areas so I could get a more, a broader overview of the business. So not only was I in media and operations, but I took a job in business operations so that I understood how the company was looking at things. And I said one of the best things I ever did was to learn to tell my story by the numbers. From there, I went into a number of positions, telecommunications. From telecommunications, I went into what was called satellite news gathering at the time, and supported live sports, news, and entertainment. I moved from there to Discovery. And when I went to Discovery, I went to start a production unit. So again, in the same area, but always, trying to really broaden my perspective. And I stayed at Discovery for a little bit, maybe 3 years, and I really miss New York, which is where I've spent most of my career and life. And so went back to ABC for a bit and got a call from HBO that HBO was looking for a head of what was at the time traditional media. And wonderful brand, wonderful opportunity. And the one, I guess, piece of advice I would say here, I was not looking for a job, but a wise woman once told me, you should talk to people because you never know. And she was right. And I took a job at HBO, and I left there as head of technology and launching their first direct-to-consumer product, HBO Now at the time. They've gone through several iterations of that. But again, I think through curiosity and continuous learning, I was able to continue to both add to my education, to my portfolio, and had a wonderful time along the way. I decided to leave HBO in the beginning of 2019. I'd been in the corporate world a really long time. And so now I'm spending my time advising early stage startups and doing independent consulting and really enjoying that. very different for me and has opened up again. I would say every, I don't know, couple of years, I like to open up something new and something different that I hadn't been doing. So I'm really enjoying that time now.
What an interesting journey, Diane. Thank you for that. Christina.
Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. So unlike you, you're in yoga pants. I put eye makeup on for the first time in 3 months. So, you know, kind of the opposite. I went the opposite route. I got dressed up today. So, as I think about my career path looks more like floor is lava than a path. It really bounced between big companies, medium-sized companies. I worked for Amazon, which is one of the biggest companies in the world right now. So I've taken a lot of twists and turns in my career. I was also a communication major at Douglas College. I graduated in '94. And it's interesting, Diane, because my senior year internship did not result in my first job. I interned my senior year with Rutgers, and there was a hiring freeze as I was graduating. So that was kind of plan A, and I didn't have a plan B. And so I graduated kind of like launched out of a cannon into space and went, okay, now what? Right now I have to go find my first job. And I think as I think about the students here, maybe thinking about how they enter the career workforce, my first couple jobs were sales jobs. I sold door to door, actually. Wow. In the beginning. I sold shoes at the mall. I sold air compressors and rock drills and party tents over the phone.
That's awesome.
So it was not a very auspicious start, you might think, for someone who, you know, as I looked at my resume, I graduated magna cum laude and I had highest honors in my major. And, you know, I thought, oh my gosh, like, what did I do? Like, I thought I had screwed up. But as I think back, you know, that was over 20 years ago, those early experiences were so pivotal in giving me some really great life skills and some really great professional skills. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, learning how to sell, everything is sales. I don't care what job you take, everything is sales. So getting that early sales experience was great. Selling door to door taught me a lot about resiliency and bravery and how to get the door slammed in your face and go to the next door and try again. So how to kind of pick myself up and keep going. And so, you know, I eventually got into the technology industry by starting my own company. That was kind of how I got my career that I have today going. I was always interested in tech, but at the time, STEM for tech for women, it wasn't a thing. Girls didn't go into computer science. They didn't really study that kind of stuff. I think, you know, now, you know, if all of that had been available, I probably would have pursued a much more technical career, like maybe gone the CIO, CTO route or something like that. But I ended up on the business side just because of some of my early career experiences. I love being a part of startups. Something I advise everybody to do, whether you start your own or you join a startup. You'll learn 360 degrees of how a business works, or even if it's a research company, whatever that startup does, you're going to learn everything, and you're going to have experience and perspective across the entire life cycle of how a product gets to market, sales, marketing, finance, HR, all of it. So those have been some really fantastic experiences, my startup experience. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to join Amazon, which has been the most amazing experience of my career. And I hope to stay here until I have the opportunity to do what Diane does and consult. Amazon stock keeps going. That'll come sooner rather than later. But yeah, this has just really been the pinnacle of my career, to be at a company with so many smart, innovative people. The pace is amazing, really been fantastic. And just all the things that I've done prior to that have led me to this place. And just very briefly about what exactly I do and what I've done my whole career is basically business development. I sit between sales and marketing. My job essentially is to create an environment where sales happen. So I don't do the actual marketing and advertising and demand generation. and I don't do the end sales. There's this field called business development and strategic alliances, which sits in the middle of that. And it's a lot of fun. It's very dynamic, always doing something new every day. And that's really where I've found my niche in the tech industry, and I've been doing it for over 20 years.
That's very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Christina. And Janine, you at Instagram, and you've been at Google. Tell the students about your career.
Yeah, I also put on my favorite red lipstick for the first time since I don't know when, and it felt great, actually. I think I should stop wearing jean shorts like during the day. That's a little reminder. Yeah, I think similar to Christina, I do not have an auspicious start to my career. I did a number of internships when I was at Douglas and Rutgers. I majored in English and political science and have a certificate in women's leadership from the IWL. I took internships with the government, in business, all over the place throughout my years at Douglas. And to be really honest, I got to my senior year and was completely lost, had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I had spent, my entire school career, like gunning to the next thing. How am I going to get Phi Beta Kappa? How am I going to graduate with honors? How am I going to do this? And honestly, never took the time to sort out my own head on what made me happy and what I wanted to do. So I made the decision in the spring of my senior year that I was going to buy a one-way ticket to Honolulu from New York and move to Hawaii with a friend of mine. We're still very close. He and I grew up together in Bergen County, and he also went to Rutgers. And so I glittered my graduation cap when I walked in graduation with Aloha, and spent the summer working. I had been interning at or working part-time actually at the Eagleton Institute of Politics, and I worked there through the summer. And August of 2002, I got on a one-way plane and landed in Waikiki and lived in a hostel for $13 a night. Wow. Until I think it's a little more. I actually looked it up the other day. I think they're up to like 20 something a night, but shared a room with 7 other kids who were also on various life stages and traveling around the world. I got a job as a server, which is something I had done all through college to make money and pay for books and cover my rent and everything else, at the Bubblegum Shrimp Company. So I spent a year and a half in Honolulu serving shrimp and all sorts of fun cocktails to tourists from all over the world.
What a great story.
It was a wonderful experience. I cannot sit here and tell you that I didn't have a lot of moments throughout that. I blocked them out of my head, but I definitely had plenty of moments where I thought I had ruined my life. I was never going to get myself back on track. Like, there's so much uncertainty, but honestly, then I would just like pick up and roll down to the beach or take a yoga class or go on a hike. And I found myself a lot in that year, honestly, and I still dip back. That's 20 years later. I still dip back into that moment in time when I find myself a little bit lost and uncertain of my path, and remember like that centering there. I then moved back to New Jersey. I was very lucky that, I had parents that took me back in, and I didn't have to, I had their support, so I didn't have to worry about rent or things like that. Thankfully, very grateful for that. My dad retired about a month after I moved home. So there was a period of time where I was not working and my dad was retired. I don't know how my mom didn't murder us, because she would come home from work every day and my dad and I were, hanging out. In retrospect, my dad passed away about 5 years ago. I'm so grateful that I had that time to be with my dad. But again, that whole moment, I was sitting there thinking I had ruined my life. I had a hard time finding a job. I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but hindsight's 2020. I had that time with my father, and I'm so happy that I have those memories. I eventually took a position in a pharmaceutical company. As we all know, New Jersey has lots of companies in that industry, as an administrative assistant. That was my first role. And I did scheduling and booked travel and organized meetings and bought lots of lunches for the execs. It was a Japanese company that were coming in for different summits and conferences. About 6 months into that role, so this was 2004, the tech industry was nobody even really talked about it at that point in the way we do now. They asked me to start helping out with a digital project that the company was working on. And it was honestly just because I was comfortable with computers. I will say computers, not even technology, it was computers. And they asked me to start training doctors and researchers on how to use this new technology that was transferring FDA submissions from paper-based to tech-based. Long story short, that ended up sort of kickstarting my career in tech. I ended up spending only a little bit over a year at that company, and got a position in 2005 to work for Google in New York. Google in New York at that time had about 300 people. They are probably close to 10,000 in the city at this point. I don't know. I don't work there anymore, but I know they have a massive footprint. I got in there early. So similar to what Christina is saying, while it was not a startup, it was definitely a moment in the company's time where you wore a bunch of hats and you were given a lot of responsibility that maybe you shouldn't have had, but that was the way things rolled. I just took every opportunity to learn. There was nothing I said no to. Every single project that was thrown at me, I would try it. I would lean on colleagues. I would use Google all the time to research how to do things, and was able to grow my career for about 10 years at Google in different parts of marketing, partnerships, business development. On the software side, eventually I moved more to the hardware side, working with new technologies such as the self-driving car project, life sciences work that the company was doing. Really, really exciting moment. And in 2015, I got a really unexpected call from the Obama administration. So I left I am in California now, so I did move to the West Coast. I left my husband and my dogs in San Francisco. I moved to DC and I joined a team in the White House called the United States Digital Service that is using technology to improve government services. My roots, as I said, political science background. So I kind of went back to where I always thought I would be, but totally different environment. And I had to learn all over again what was going on. It was real. At this point, I'm, years into my career. I worked there till the end of the administration. And then I moved back to California and did end up, I didn't expect to do this, but I ended up going back into the tech industry and back into big tech. So I've been with Instagram leading our global consumer marketing team for the past 2 years, which has frankly been most exciting because it is so broad in terms of working in Asia and Latin America and Europe. Of course, all of that is now just Zoom calls at 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock at night. There's no more travel involved. So that's been a bit of a shift.
Thank you. Thank all three of you for telling the students about your journey. And in order to advance and climb the ladder, so to speak, and to be, in high level executive or leadership level positions, there's certain skills you need to have. But first, I know students are curious about this concept called emotional intelligence, and it's a big part about building relationships. But just to get them sort of set up, what do you see as some of the qualities, if you had a really emotionally intelligent employee or one who didn't have much emotional intelligence, what are some of those qualities so they can get a feeling for what emotional intelligence is? Whoever wants to jump in, it's fine.
I can start with that.
Okay.
So you bring your whole self to work, right? We can't help that. Women do it even more so than men. I think men are a little better at compartmentalizing, but we bring our whole selves to work. Being emotionally intelligent means bringing your whole self to work, but you don't have to impose your whole self at work, right? So there's a difference between being your authentic self and not imposing your authentic self. You're still in a professional environment. So be self-aware. And if you've had a bad morning or you're exhausted or whatever, you have to be self-aware enough to not spew that all over everybody else, and understand that everybody else is coming to the table with their own histories and backgrounds and good or bad moments, and being able to temper that. And for me, being emotionally intelligent was always about being able to read the room, understand where other people were coming from, and again, keeping that level of professionalism. And I've got 2 kids. And, there were many, many years where I was up at 4 a.m. or, there were just moments where I would be exhausted and strung out, but I didn't have to, and not that I didn't not share it, but I didn't have to like, impose that on everybody.
negative
There was
side.
always a
Yeah.
limit. Right. Yeah. I think that's a big part of it, having that self-awareness.
Absolutely.
I think awareness is the word there, both self-aware and aware of your environment. And I'm just going to say exactly what you said, perhaps in a little different way, but it is, everybody comes to the office or a problem with their own lens. And so it's trying to be open to others' lenses as well as your own. So it's that, the awareness of both yourself, the room, the environment, and being empathetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that being empathetic is also a big part of that.
I agree.
A skill that is incredibly helpful for this, and you actually have to hone it. This might sound surprising, but is listening. And there's phases in your career that the type of listening changes. When I was really early in my career at Google, we brought on a chairman emeritus CEO. He was had been working in the industry this was in the marketing industry for 40 years, and he had retired and was moving on to just consulting. And we brought him into the office in New York for 1 day a week, and he was open invitation to anybody in the team who wanted to talk to him. And he would sit in an office by himself every day. And I noticed that nobody ever went to talk to him. So I was probably, at this point, I think I was probably 26 years old. I'm a couple of years into my career. He would just sit there. He was writing stuff and reading. So I remember one day I kind of crept in. He's an icon in the industry, and he used to come in just beautifully dressed every day. His fountain pen matched the handkerchief and his bow tie. And I sort of sheepishly, knocked on the door and asked him if I could talk to him. And he just got so happy and pulled out a chair. And I used to sit with him almost an hour every week as long as he was around. And one of the things that he said that I never forget was, he said, successful people love to hear themselves talk. They really love it. And if you just ask the right questions and you listen, they're going to tell you everything you need to know.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so early, all throughout my career, I still do this a lot, but I just learned that the more questions you ask, people really will start to open up, and then you get out of them what they're worried about. As I've shifted and now I have more leadership roles, and I'm mindful of the fact that I'm the one who has to talk a lot, I've realized again how important it is for me to just shut up and be quiet. And with my own team, listen to them. What are they struggling with? It's personal, but sometimes it's political inside of the organization. And the more I listen, the better manager and better leader I can be. And that to me is just like a critical skill for honing your emotional intelligence.
I love that. You're all very successful. What really sets you apart from other people that didn't get your job along the way? Like, what are some of the skills that set you apart from others that helped you be successful?
I guess I'll go first again. I'll go. I think a couple of different things. Janine, you talked about asking questions. I've only been in Amazon for 2 years, and yet I already have a reputation as being the person who asks insightful questions. It's like my superpower. And it's not the 101 questions. It's the 201 and the 301 level questions where I'm asking about root causes and I'm asking, the questions that I'm asking are getting people to think in different ways. And I think that is definitely one of the things that sets me apart. The job that I just interviewed for, the job that I'm in now, when I applied for it, the hiring manager contacted my current manager to say, it's just kind of a process at Amazon. You have to make sure, is she on a performance plan? Is she allowed to change jobs, whatever? And my manager said, when I interviewed Christina for the first time, I didn't get to ask her a single question. She asked me questions for 90 minutes, and that was how I knew I wanted to hire her. And so when I got to interview with him, he said, okay, Christina, he's like, I understand that, you like to ask questions. So, he expected me to go into the interview asking all the questions. And I thought, how funny, because I did. Like, and at the end, he was like, okay, I have to ask you one or two. But he sort of, again, wanted me for the position on his team because I knew I could ask insightful questions. So it's one of those things that is part of my brand, that I know how to ask insightful questions to get people to think differently about things. I think the other thing too that is part of my brand is I am very dynamic, and I try to bring a sense of fun to everything I do. Gosh, we spend 8, 10, 12
Right.
hours of work like every day. And if we're not enjoying it, what's the point? So I really try to bring that sense of levity and humor and make people smile. And I think that's another thing that's been important, that sets me apart, is that kind of dynamism.
I like that you mentioned the superpower, because I think every person has this, set of skills that they're really good at. That's really just authentic to them. And I think even having the awareness of what you're good at is so important. What about you, Diane?
I think it's a holistic approach. So while I might have been in technology in one of my roles, it was always important for me to understand how what my team and what I was doing, how it either affected, could be helpful, or interact with other disciplines within the company, and always invited their point of view. And I think by doing that, we always created better solutions because we weren't so insular. And you create both those relationships that give people you're working with confidence, and it's that, influencing, right? You're not necessarily all on the same team, but you really all are on the same team.
Right.
And so you need to treat people that way. So I think that is probably one of the things that I've been noted for throughout my career.
That's interesting. So I'm assuming you all are, it's still pretty much in a male-dominated industry. Is that correct?
That is very
okay. And, talk about navigating that, and maybe even work in, has mentorship played a role for you in during your career? I'll let Janine go first.
Yeah, I have mostly been in male-dominated industries. A lot of times the teams I've been on have been more diverse, but regardless, I think one of the organizations I worked in was 90% male, 10% women. And not only was I often the only woman in the room, but I was the only non-quote unquote technical person. And I put that in quotes because I think the way that we hold up technical talent and how we act that is something more important than other talent, or almost all of us are technical in some way. Relationships are critical here, and it's not always the way that you think they are. So having allies throughout an organization when you feel outnumbered, and whether that is sometimes it is in your own head, or sometimes you yourself have created a narrative of what is going on, and that is not always the truth. But building relationships at all different levels, and a lot of times those are your peers. It's not just the folks that are the senior most people in the room, or the if you ever hear this, HIPPO is a term that's used a lot. Highest I forget what the
I haven't heard that term.
It's the highest paid person's opinion in the room, and
right.
Yeah, I forget what the
I can't either, but when you said it clicked.
Yeah, but a lot of times it means that the person who has the most status in the room, they say something and everyone scrambles to do what they're saying. And if that's you have to be really careful, because you don't always have the answer. Your job as a leader is to get the collective brain power to bring you to an answer. But what I found is when you're in that kind of an environment, and that happened to me a lot in these very, very technical teams, is that there was an inclination to defer to the senior most engineering brain in that room. And actually a lot of the work that I was doing was bringing new technologies into the world where it would clash with humans. And when that happens, actually, it doesn't matter if your technology is brilliant and it works perfectly. A self-driving car is great, but if everybody wants to beat that thing up with baseball bats on the street, doesn't matter how good the technology is, you need to bring humans along.
Mhm.
And to do that, you need diverse group of people that understand communities and users and human behavior. So a lot of times what I would do is do all my sort of work around the building with all of my peers that I knew would be in a room, especially if it was going to be a contentious room, and get a sense of where everybody was. How do you feel about this decision that's being made? Do you think this is right? Do you think it's wrong? Do you think we can strengthen it? It takes a lot of work up front. It's almost like politics, right? Like you never get your bill to the floor and then wonder if anyone's behind it. You round up the votes before then.
Yes.
It's very similar in big organizations. And you have to be comfortable a lot of times that you don't always get everything that you're pushing for. And I think that's a disappointing lesson. And it's disappointing, for me, it's disappointing every time. Like no matter how many times I don't get what I'm fighting for, I'm still disappointed. But you got to pick yourself, move on, like find your people again and keep pushing for what's right.
Yeah, but you're talking about building consensus and, you know, doing that at your level and expanding and, you know, and putting in a lot of work prior to the big discussions, prior to the meetings, prior to the decisions. So,
yeah.
And building consensus, that's a big part of being an emotionally intelligent person. It's all about influence. Like Christina said, sales. It's everything goes back to sales essentially. Can you?
So one of the Q&A, one of the people asked about how do you break into the boys club, right? And I think luckily we're at a time, this was not the case when my career started, but we're at a time now where women, we don't have to break into the boys club, we can create a girls club. Or we create a club of people who don't care about the boys club. And that's something that I did. There have been times, there was one time where I was the only woman in the entire company, 19 men and me. That I happened to meet my husband there, and that's another story. So yeah, talk about being male dominant. I remember one time being in a restaurant. It was one of these like power lunches. I was the only woman attendee, like the only women in the room were the wait staff, right? So this is something that I've been representing my gender like for most of my career because I've worked in software companies and like, you know, hardcore technology companies. And I think the way that I navigated was, one is I had to know the technology well enough to be able to have an intelligent conversation with the hardcore techies, right? Which are largely men today, less so now, I think, but certainly, you know, 10, 15 years ago, mostly men. So I really had to learn and I had to know my stuff because the tech industry is more of a meritocracy than some other industries, which are a little more hierarchical. And that's one of the things I like about this industry. So if you're smart and you know your stuff, it kind of gets you to a level regardless of gender. So I had to take the time to learn the technology that I could talk to the architects and have an architectural level discussion with them. And then two, I love something that Diane said about communicating through the numbers, just demonstrating my results and just showing the impact of what I was doing. And when you can demonstrate results in a black and white fashion, it's kind of hard to argue with that. And so I sort of, you know, would advocate for my results of those things. And so those were, and again, bringing that sense of levity in a professional way to the situation can disarm people and build relationships. And so those are some of the ways I navigated it. And then you asked about having a mentor. Absolutely. I've had mostly men mentors. I have had one female mentor. Absolutely using your mentors to help you navigate certain situations. And Janine's point about the meeting before the meeting and then the meeting and the meeting after the meeting, right? Those were things that I learned from my mentors. And yeah, you never really wanted to introduce a new idea in the meeting. You introduced it to every individual person before the meeting.
Absolutely.
And then, right, and then you talk about it in the meeting, and then you go to everybody after the meeting. And, you know, so mentors did play a role in that. And again, it does take both female and male mentors and sponsors to really navigate all of that. So yeah, you can't really break into a club that doesn't want you. You have to create your own club and demonstrate results that they can't ignore.
That's great. And thank you for going in. All panelists, feel free to peek into the Q&A and latch onto, but I know, Diane, I'm sure you have something to say about this.
Yeah, I think I definitely male dominated, certainly in the beginning, certainly on the sports side and the news side. And I think I ignored it. And as we all talked, we know what we do well. And I would just plow through. Now, nobody was disrespectful to me. So it isn't that someone can treat you with disrespect and you would let that go. That wasn't the case. It was just, how do you get your voice heard? Because your voice is very different than everybody else's voice. Mm-hmm. And you get your voice heard by just having good ideas. And to the point both of you have made, you have to do your homework. You have to do your homework. And then over time, I didn't think of it as male, female. I just thought, this is an approach, and I think this is key, that is true to myself. As long as I'm being true to myself, I'm comfortable. And Janine, you talked about if your idea, you felt badly if your idea doesn't get embraced. But I think that going in with an opinion or a point of view, you've changed what the outcome was. Might not have been the one you went in with, but it wasn't the one that was on the table in the beginning. And so I think there is tremendous value in not pre-editing yourself, that you get the discussion out, and oftentimes you walk out with a solution that wasn't one of the original ones. And so it is now stronger and better because it has had ideas come in from different directions.
Yeah, and there's a lot of smart people out there that don't speak up. And so all that intelligence, doesn't get to the next level. But we have a lot of students, they talk to me a lot about insecurity, having a lack of confidence. You've heard imposter syndrome. And then we're telling them, no, you have to advocate for yourself. You need to lean in. But can you talk to them about the reality of, how do you deal with insecurity? We all have it, but because you show up in your suit and you're polished and you've had years of public speaking, they don't know, they can't even imagine that you've ever felt insecure in your life, but we all have. And how do you deal with, normal insecurity and then learning to advocate for yourself?
Oh my God, it's so real.
So
I 20 years into my career, it's not gone. A lot of it, honestly, I deploy some really specific tactics. I'll give some examples from recent times. I work in an incredibly data-driven environment. So we're all saying here, need to come to every conversation with all my facts straight. Mm-hmm. I have a colleague who's become a really good friend. He's a PhD in data science. He, for the past couple of years, has been trying to improve as a leader. I've been trying to improve on the data side. He and I have a nonstop chat. We used to sit next to each other, but we don't, now it's a chat thread. We used to have actual conversations, but I have a constant chat thread where I will ask him for help all the time. Help me make sure that I'm representing this data well. Am I explaining this the right way? Is there anything else I can dig to? Keep coaching me on this. And in exchange, he'll come to me and say, I'm really stuck with my team. Can you help me manage them through this? So we've sort of brokered this partnership to help each other. But things that you don't see behind the scenes, a lot of the women colleagues I've had over the years, before any big presentation, something that we're going into a contentious meeting, we will take each other into a conference room and it's called a murder board, but pretend that you are that executive that she's going up against or I'm going up against, and role play out the scenario. Here's the questions they're going to ask you. They're going to attack you on that. You're going to get pushed back on that. These things are all happening quietly behind the scenes. You don't see that. You don't see that in this forum. When you have the person on stage or they're in the meeting and it seems like they knew everything. I think women and women and people of color, like, yeah, we do often put in twice the amount of work before we go into these rooms. It's an unfortunate reality. It is what it is. Like, from my experience, I've never been able to be in a room and just like kind of fly off the cuff. I've seen a lot of white men do that, but it's not something I've been doing. So just, I think, acknowledging that it is real, that it happens to everyone, and then start to get your tactics and your tools in place to overcome it. And people want to help you with this behind the scenes, and nobody ever knows that stuff's going on in the rooms. It's like, it's a quiet, confident thing. We don't talk about it, but it's going on.
Yeah, ask for help, right? You're allowed to ask for help. Nobody expects you to be a perfect 100% of the time. When I started going for more senior level roles in my career, I don't remember who told it to me, but somebody said to me, no one's going to hire you for a job you're not qualified for.
Yes.
And that was so freeing. And I was like,
yes.
Oh my God, you're right. Like, no one's going to put me in a position where I'm going to bomb out. Right. So that for me was the big way that I really dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome. I didn't have to worry about getting a job that I wasn't qualified for. So I just went for it, and other people could decide if I was qualified or not. And that was a very freeing thing. So, no one's going to put you in a situation where companies can't afford it.
I worried about that too. That was like my biggest fear, that someone would hire me and I wouldn't be able to do the job. That was my biggest fear. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Now I know.
But that's not going to happen.
It will never
they're
happen.
Give the job
I
to
actually
somebody else.
tell students that.
Yeah.
When I mentor them.
And just to add to that, being qualified doesn't mean that you've done this, and this. It is your capabilities. And I've actually, in the latter part of my career, made a point of hiring people who weren't in the same industry. I was more interested in their capabilities because they brought a different point of view. And again, I think it is when you put all of those unique points of view together is how you do something special. In terms of insecurity, I don't even know if it's asking for help. We're all good. We know what we're good at. We know what our colleagues are good at. And it is just, whether it's role playing or making that phone call and saying, if I said it this way, would I have covered everything that people would be thinking about? There is no shame in that. That does not make you less qualified for what you're doing. And in fact, that is part of relationship building, because now you're joining forces with somebody, and that's a give and take. And we all have something to give, and we take as we need to. And as long as that's a two-way street, that's the beginning of building a relationship.
I know you all work hard, and maybe sometimes, as women, we're working even harder. How are you handling, bouts of burnout, work-life balance, and things like that? Because you need to be happy. Like, I used to want to be successful. Now my goal in life is to be happy, and that involves figuring out, managing your life. What about you, Janine?
It's funny, when I saw that question on the pack of questions, I was like, what a time to ask that one. I'll be really honest, I'm struggling with burnout right now, like really having a really rough time. The environment in which we're operating right now is not very aligned with the way that I like to work. I really miss the camaraderie.
Yes.
Most Friday nights, I want to take my laptop and honestly just like smash it with a hammer. It is how much I don't want to look at it anymore. And, like, I'm sure everyone on this call, I'm struggling because the the friendships and the social interactions are also on video. So I'm definitely like right now in it. And I don't know that I've ever experienced burnout to this extent. I've experienced like a lot of work and a lot of stress, and you figure out how to manage it. You try to box in your time. You try to take moments away and do things. But right now, I'm trying to be much more intentional, and I failed miserably this week, carving out time for work stimulated things, but frankly also non-news. Given everything that's going on right now, I feel like I can't like shut my brain off. And So right now, I honestly don't know what to say. Like normally what I
Right on.
do is carve out, I actually get way more structured with my schedule when I'm feeling burned out. I set much cleaner boundaries. I'm going to get to this yoga class. I'm going to meet friends. I'm going to book trips. But right now, like those escapes are really, really missing. So it's tough. It's tough. And it creeps into your work. When you're burned out, you do not perform as well as you normally do.
No, we're human.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
I think I've got a very specific opinion on work-life balance because I don't think it exists. I think it's a misnomer because balance seems that there's like a scale and it's like this. And I think at different times of your career and your life, it changes. There's a book I read once called The Pie Life, and I forget the name of the author, but she, instead of an analogy of a scale, she talks about slices of a pie. And, you know, at certain times of your career, the career slice is going to be bigger and the personal slice is going to be smaller, or the kid slice is going to be bigger or smaller, or the social life slice is bigger or smaller, right? And I thought that was a much better analogy because I think those slices of the pie do change over time. When you're working full time and you have babies, me time is like maybe taking a shower, like maybe, right? So you've got to be realistic, like, yeah. Life balance is I took a shower today and I didn't have a 2-year-old pressed up against the glass while I was doing it, right? Like, you know, so you've got to look at work-life balance changes over time, and be comfortable with that. The other thing that I'll say too is that, you know, if you want to have a really high-powered career, work-life balance also starts with your life partner. Mm-hmm. And the family choices you make. So picking the right partner in life is going to have I'm reading a lot about how women are taking on during COVID all the child care stuff. And some of that is because couples didn't set expectations however many years ago, maybe even before they had kids, about what life would look like when they had kids and they both had high-powered jobs. And my poor husband, God bless him, we weren't even engaged yet. And I was like, look, dude, here's how it's going to be. I don't cook. I'm not quitting my job. Your mom is not raising the kids. So it's either a nanny or daycare. You pick, right? He was like, okay. You know, but it became really important because, you know, when I interviewed for the job at Amazon in my first 2 years, I was on the road 50% of the time. I left every Monday night and I came home every Thursday night. Okay. And I almost didn't apply for the job. And my husband said, it's Amazon. You go for it. We will figure it out. And let Amazon tell you you're not qualified. Don't you pull yourself out because you think we can't make it work. We will make it work, right? So he is so supportive. He's at soccer today, right, while I'm here. Yeah. So, you know, I think, again, work-life balance it's very intentional, and it starts with who you choose to share your life journey with and how you set your family up. It's not something that you just, oh my gosh, we're both up for promotions and I'm pregnant. How are we going to fit? It's too late at that point. Like you've got to start earlier. And so I'm saying this to those of you who are in college now, because you need to hear it now. Like really think about that. Because now is the time to be thinking about, you know, how do I want that to go? And who's this person in my life that's going to help me achieve that?
Absolutely. Diane, I want you to shift a little bit. I want to get to a student question here. She's asking about how do you approach building a mentor relationship with someone at a higher level than you? Do you have any advice for this student?
I think that people are always are almost always willing to give their time. So if there is something specific, we did a program at HBO that I think you can do more individually, which is we did 10 cups of coffee and we would match mentees with mentors, but really it was just a half-hour cup of coffee or a virtual coffee or a virtual tea. And you say to somebody, you know, you'd like to know a little bit about whatever. Do you have 30 minutes? Could we have a cup of coffee? I know people are frightened to do that because when we did this program, they were, but there was not one that came back and got a bad response. So remember that.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, a lot of people aren't asked. The Douglas students are always surprised when I say, yeah, through the Bold Center, if you'd like to talk to a Douglas alumna that's working in the industry you're interested, I never get a no. Sometimes I don't even have their email. I reach out on LinkedIn. The Douglas alumni and Rutgers alumni are always willing to help the students. So it's a matter of just reaching out, and those connections turn into internships, turn into
Exactly.
jobs and things like that.
Can I add one thing? I know
Yes,
you're
you
running
may.
out, but make sure you prepare yourself for that time
Well,
so
that's
that you're
absolutely
using
true.
that individual's time well.
It's an interview.
Yeah.
Anytime you're speaking to, it's absolutely an interview. You need to be prepared. You should be dressed appropriately. You should be ready. I tell students, the Bold Center, we'll do practice mock interviews with you. I'll help you design your questions, like build that confidence.
Right.
And the Douglas course does a nice job of that too. There's an assignment the students do when they interview. So it's great. I don't know if you have advice for a student here that's writing in, Justine. You know, she's an engineering student, but she's found through her leadership position in her student org that she really enjoys the intersection of business, marketing, and technology. So it's changed her perspective on her potential career path. And she doesn't want to completely pivot to marketing, but she says, how do I find something that helps fulfill both my passions? I don't know if you have any advice for just.
I might be able to help there because, again, I think that's where business development came into place for me and strategic alliances. So the way that you get started in those jobs is, again, I did it by being part of a small company. And, when you're a small company, you align yourself to larger companies so that you can grow. And so taking on that responsibility of managing that strategic alliance and again, when you're working with a business partner, you're trying to find business opportunities to work together. And the field of business development for me is how I've been able to blend sales, marketing, business strategy, strategic alliance, but there's no major for that. It's hard to major in. Justine, I would be more than happy to talk to you more about that offline if you would like to. But that's where I have found that blend of business and marketing is in the field of business development.
And I can connect students with Christina. Thank you. Janine.
Just build on that I think there's a little bit of a myth in the tech industry that engineers are always like locked away in a room and they're just coding and they're only focused on their code. But the truth of the matter is, like, there are some, like when I worked at Google, there's a whole academic like cohort of engineers who were doing technical research, and it was almost like they were still PhDs in universities.
Mm-hmm.
But a large percentage of engineers are working on the business. And the best engineers I've ever worked with, honestly, are the ones that have an incredible amount of curiosity about the customers and the consumers, and the ones that I would bring with me on meetings and in focus groups. So if you are an engineering student and you're also interested in the other side, I just think your career path is pretty sparkly, because we need more folks like that.
Yeah.
I agree, especially product management is the intersection of those three as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, we have our Douglas alumna, Temi, who's at Xfinity, is in product management. And she feels so lucky to have that position because she's been able to blend all her interests. What advice would you give your younger self? If you each had just a moment to, because the Douglas students are essentially your younger self.
If you're feeling scared, but you have something to say, push yourself and say it.
Okay. Love that.
A career is oh, sorry, go ahead, Jenny.
You go.
A career is a journey. It's not a destination. And success isn't necessarily measured by your job title or how much money you make. And give yourself time to learn to be a professional and let your career develop. It doesn't have to happen before you're 30.
I would say that when we talk about things like building relationships and networking and using all that language that seems very transactional, think about that more as building your life around human connection, because through that process, you make a lot of friends, you have a lot of fun, you build this quote unquote network, which sounds like something really transactional, but at the end of the day, it's actually just people that you care about and who care about you. And it's so powerful and wonderful. So invest in that, not because of what you might get out of it in terms of career, but because what you're going to get out of it for your actual like life and happiness and satisfaction.
I love that. Last quick question. You know, on your bad days, you know, over time we develop some self-care, some little things we do to help us feel better on our bad days. You know, what are some things that you might do to help yourself feel a little bit better and pick yourself back up? I'll go with Diane first.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, it is to be by myself, because I'm always with people and interacting. So whether it is to just kind of sit and turn my mind off by watching something, cooking something, being outside and doing something, but it's usually getting back into me.
Okay. Janine.
Sometimes it's actually just stepping away. You can't always do that, but sometimes you just have to say, all right, you know what, like next Friday, or if you have to plan it ahead, sometimes you can be spontaneous, a lot of times you can't, but just recognizing when you're getting to that point and saying, I gotta back out of this for a little bit. And usually you can bounce back from that, but you just have to do that. You can't always just push through it, honestly, especially if you have personal stuff going on. It's not just work.
Yeah, even a walk throughout my day, if I'm feeling particularly stressed, is actually very helpful. Christina.
So yes, taking the time to breathe, also reflecting on past achievements and knowing that, you know, yeah, like you've done this, you can do this. I'm meant to do this. I'm doing this thing that only I can do. And knowing that, and knowing that I'm making a difference and making an impact, that's also something that keeps me going.
Very good advice. I'm about to put for the students the link to the agenda for the rest of the day. But Diane, Christina, and Janine, I want to thank you so much for dedicating time on a sunny Saturday, or at least it's sunny in New Jersey. And thank you for being here. Students can reach out to the Bold Center to get connected with speakers. And thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. And I'm getting ready to go to do a little yoga at our yoga break coming up at 2. So ladies, have a nice day. I wish you the best and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
You.
It's been a pleasure. Nice meeting everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.